And I think the first thing that's helpful is to just reconnect with who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing? And does it still bring you joy and fulfillment? And once you can answer those questions, then it's easier to make changes. And sometimes the changes really are big, like blow up your life kind of. I need to make a huge change because this isn't working for me. But many other times it's small things that we don't even recognize that will make a big difference. And that process of going into work and just getting the work done didn't work anymore because I was doing way more than I was capable of physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I didn't even recognize it until someone pulled me inside and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I hadn't even stopped to ask myself that question, "Am I okay?" But it was just that simple question that caused me to stop and pause and say, "You know what? Really, I'm not."
On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Ben Reinking. He is a board certified pediatric cardiologist. He's a medical educator and certified physician development coach, as well as the owner of The Developing Doctor. He's a partner. He's a stepfather, dog owner, gardener, Iowa Hawkeye fan, and wannabe writer. Me too, Ben. Me too. Now, here's the thing. I was drawn to Ben because of his coaching business. And I feel like it's so needed right now in the physician space, but also in anyone who's in healthcare, who's a nurse, who's a nursing assistant, anyone, front desk. Like, we in the healthcare industry are really struggling at the moment. But I also want to extend it to folks who are just in the daily grind, right? Unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of clients that are coming in and telling me like, "Hey doc, I'm working the job of 2 to 3 people. I can't really do this. I can't take care of my health. I can't make meals. I mean, I can't even take breaks. I mean, there's so many things." And they're getting to the point where they're feeling like they need to escape their life or career or find something else to do. Now, if this resonates with you, this podcast is for you. I was drawn to Ben in particular from his Instagram post that was the lies I've told myself. And really it boiled down to him saying, "I'm not a good doctor because I called in sick, took a vacation, wasn't available for someone who needed me." I felt that way myself. I felt guilty to tell people I was going on vacation. But it's reality, right? And I think for a lot of people, they feel guilty about taking breaks at work. They feel guilty about taking vacations from work. If this is you, this podcast is for you. And I want you to think about during the podcast, whether this resonates with you, or maybe if you're going to send it to someone, a family member, a friend that needs to hear this, really I want you to ask, are you okay? And if not, what needs to change to get you to feeling better? So with that, let's introduce you to Dr. Ben Reinking. Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Dr. Ben Reinking, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Janine. I'm so happy to be here.
Gosh, I love what you do. I'm just going to say that. And I also, you guys, I told them, I was like, where were you like right about before COVID? Maybe somewhere around 2018, 2019, where things were really starting to, let's say, amplify in my doctor burnout, doctor anxiety situation. So Ben, tell us a little bit about how you came to create your programs, your courses, everything you're doing right now to help doctors who are just struggling. Let's just say it.
Yeah, I mean, I can share a little bit of my story, but I think really it comes down to the question, like, who's going to help the helpers, right? So we're all human and we all have moments when we need help. And that includes the helpers, physicians, or whatever your role is. So I don't know that my story is very unique compared to others, but I think it's helpful to hear it. I was one of the fortunate people where I went through my medical training and what I was doing worked for the most part. And I'm old enough that people didn't really talk about burnout when I was in training. Everyone said it's tough and it's supposed to be tough, but you can do it and get through it. And when it's hard, just put your head down and keep working. And that worked for me and until it didn't. And so three things happened in my life that sort of combined, I think, to just cause things to implode. One was a positive thing. So my partner and I had been long distance for a long time and we built a house. And so it was a really great positive change in my life, but it was also a little bit stressful. Um, my parents suddenly had an illness. My mom was in a tragic car accident. Thankfully, she's fine. And then my dad had a diagnosis of cancer. He also is fine now, but so big change in my personal life. And then my professional life, I'm a pediatric cardiologist by trade, and we depend on this big multidisciplinary team. And my team fell apart. And as a result of that, a lot of the colleagues that I'd worked with for 10 years or so and had great relationships left just left. And so I found myself doing more work. And all of a sudden, all of the people that I really liked seeing every day were gone. And that process of going into work and just getting the work done didn't work anymore because I was doing way more than I was capable of physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I didn't even recognize it until someone pulled me inside and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I hadn't even stopped to ask myself that question, "Am I okay?" But it was just that simple question that caused me to stop and pause and say, "You know what? Really, I'm not." And that led to me making all sorts of changes. But that was the catalyst.
I think you brought up two really important things that happen in the medical field: changes in team, which I see it all the time, whether practices are being dissolved and taken over by a bigger conglomerate, or we've got folks moving on. It is hard. When I've worked in a team in the past, yeah, when people would get sick, they'd leave, things that happen. It shifts the dynamic and can be very hard. And I think for a lot of people right now, with a lot of shifts since the pandemic, a lot of people are doing two, three jobs because the company's not hiring someone else on.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing that a lot in my clients. And so their team has shifted, they're doing more work. And it's definitely something that, we're like, I can do this because I think a lot of us have that like drive, right? Especially if we're in a field
Mhm.
where we take care of people. But we also feel like, no, you're not even to think about, am I okay? Because, and this is where my mind was when you said that, like, we don't think about it because we're too busy trying to survive. We're just trying to do the things and help the people because that's what we do, on repeat. Does that seem like where the mindset was before you were like, am I okay? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you spend so much energy just getting through the day that it's hard to just stop and pause. And I think I also recognized that I had never developed the skills that I needed internally to even ask myself that question, right? So I didn't even know where to start. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, same thing here. When things were kind of hitting the fan for me right before COVID and going into COVID, yeah, like I had moved into my own practice. I was solo at that point. Nobody to like kind of realize like, are you okay? You know? And so yeah, I don't think we even like there was no mention even I mean, I went to naturopathic medicine school compared to conventional medical school. And yes, there was this program like the first year about like taking care of yourself. But by the
Mhm.
time you get to the fourth year, I think that's out the window. Did you guys get anything about self-care or any training in terms of taking care of you?
I don't think we did,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, I know we had some professionalism courses, but I don't think when I was going through there was much talk about self-care. I think that really started towards the end of my training when people realized that, oh, this is a problem for providers and it's a problem for patients because the providers aren't doing well. Um,
Right, right. And I think you just brought up a really good point. And this is something that I do like to kind of put out to my clients and especially for the folks who are our audience members right now. Like, guys, sometimes you're having care by someone who is really not okay, like does not feel okay, does not, mentally is really burnt out and we'll get this, you know, oh, the medical system sucks. Oh, the doctors don't care. It's like, I don't think anybody goes into the medical field not caring. I think everybody wants to make a difference. I think we end up having a hard time being able to juggle with workload and things of that nature. I know you've seen it and you
Absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
it's something that I see a lot. Now, in your kind of progression of how you're waking up and going like, oh man, am I okay? What's going on? What kind of things did you see were red flags to you about yourself in terms of your behaviors? How the practice kind of was going, how seeing clients was going, like what kind of little things stood out to you? You're like, ooh, that's not good. And maybe even, even though it's doctor, it's still relevant to anyone else out there
Yeah.
and their positions.
Yeah, great question. And I think I didn't recognize any of these signs at the in the moment, but looking back, I was like, wow, that's not normal. So one was a thought. So I had just this fantasy of just escaping. And so I walked to work and I would frequently wonder walking to work, like, what would happen if I just kept walking? Like, how long would it take for people at work to figure out that, oh, he didn't show up? Like, would it be noon? Would it be 3? And I was like, can I try that? And then on the way home, I live in Iowa. I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I would think, could I make it to the beach on my feet? Like, could I just keep walking and make it to the beach? And how long would that take? And it's like kind of a comical thought a little bit, but it also was a very real thought in my head that I was like, how many days would it take? Could I physically do it? Do I need to pack a backpack? Right? Like, so it was just this fantasy of escape. Even though I was going to show up to work the next day, it was this fantasy of escape.
It's so interesting how you mentioned that. It is. I've been there thinking, what if I just, and since my practice was in Washington, I was thinking at the time, what if I just drove to the water and like hijacked a boat?
Yeah, right.
What if I
Yes,
just
yes.
jumped on someone's
Yeah,
boat? I don't know. What would happen? Where could I go? What could I do? It's and I have heard that from other folks, women that I work with in particular. A lot of
mhm,
times we're juggling this, is it hormones or is it burnout kind of question?
yeah,
Because we'll have that like I'm done with my family, I'm quitting my career, I'm going, on a retreat or a sabbatical. And it all kind of, how do we know? Is it hormones? Is it burnout? So
yeah.
I go back to the question of it. You're walking to work, you're thinking maybe you could get lost in a corn maze out there in
Right,
Iowa,
right.
maybe I could get lost and never come back. Like
Yeah, yeah.
crazy stuff like that. What other kind of thoughts, what other kind of behaviors and things looking back were you like, oh, maybe that was it too?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned is it hormones, is it burnout? Because there definitely was a physical side for me. So, one, I was just tense all the time. At the time, I had my neck hurt, my back hurt, I had headaches, and I couldn't sleep. And
Mm.
so I was in this constant state of fight or flight, really. And I mean, that sympathetic nervous system, which probably we don't understand really well and underestimate how much it affects our behavior, but that sympathetic nervous system was just in overdrive all the time. And you can't physically, I would not like our sympathetic nervous system exists to help us when we're stressed, right? And physically, if I'm running from a bear, I would never expect myself to keep running continually and continually and continually. But if it's a mental or emotional task, for some reason we have this expectation that we need to keep doing it over and over again. But it's the same level of stress, and the body has the same response to it. We don't respond to it appropriately though.
Uh, it's so wild. It's so wild. And I think for a lot of people it's different habits, behaviors they take on. So
Yep.
we fantasize about, escaping and then we somehow end up back at work or back in the house with the family. And then there's this either avoidance, there's this I'll go from personal experience and see how this resonates for you. And if you've noticed this with yourself or other docs you've worked with,
Mhm.
there's this avoidance of where you're like, almost to the point shaking to look at your email. You're like, I don't want another thing to do today. I don't
Oh,
want to
yeah.
look at the email. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've deleted email from my phone and then like the next day I was like, oh, I actually really need to access that again. But, it's sort of like trying to make this big grand gesture. We're like, I'm doing it. And then, oh, yes, I really have to.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah, people get mad at me a little bit because I don't have my email on my phone because it was literally
Mhm.
ping, ping. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and it just amplifies, the experience. So do you recommend to some of the folks you're coaching and working with, do you recommend for them to like take the email and take the contact or like even the EHR off their phone so that they're not getting pinged all day long?
Absolutely. It's a great suggestion. I think, we talked about like these big grand gestures like escaping, which is sort of this big, almost blow up your life type event
Yeah.
to get out of work. But frequently it's smaller things that you can do and easily incorporate in your day that don't take much effort or time that make a really big difference. And removing email from your phone is a great option. Mhm.
Let's talk about blowing up your life for a minute again, just because it is such a big theme that I hear. And there's the concept of midlife crisis. Obviously, we don't even have to get to midlife to have it. Because
Yeah.
what I saw, you guys, with Dr. Ben's website, it's called thedevelopingdoctor.com. On there, he's talking about pre-med, like med students, like he's covering all the bases of where you could be like, I'm just blowing my life up. Like it's just forget about it. So when you start thinking these thoughts, like one of the easy techniques, yes, take the email off, take the things that notify you of different things. What are some of the other things that you've really found to be incredibly helpful when you get in that, like, let's call it F it mode?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the hard thing is frequently it's a big systemic cause that leads to people to feel this way. There's some external factor that we can't control that leads to these feelings. Um, but frequently it's an internal solution. And I think the first thing that's helpful is to just reconnect with who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing? And does it still bring you joy and fulfillment? And once you can answer those questions, then it's easier to make changes. And sometimes the changes really are big, like blow up your life kind of. I need to make a huge change because this isn't working for me. But many other times it's small things that we don't even recognize that will make a big difference.
I can see that. I can see that. Now, one of the things that I'm looking at and may resonate with some folks who are listening. We may be starting a new career, or we may be in school and learning things, and maybe we're going for a master's, maybe we're going for a bachelor's, whatever it may be. I found that when I was in naturopath school, there was still a level of like, I want to blow up my life kind of situation there, and definitely looking at the why, right? Now, how can folks, in those beginner stages, let's say haven't got to the career, you're in the studying phase, what are some of the things folks in that range can look at, in addition to the why, but also what are some other little tweaks that we could do when we're in that learning phase, or
Yeah.
haven't fully got to the career phase yet?
Yep. I think a first step is to focus on the things they're not actually teaching you. So when you're in training, you are learning the knowledge, the skills that you need to practice your trade, whatever that may be. And that is so overwhelming, but all of your identity goes into becoming that one thing, right? And you sometimes lose the sight that you're a whole person that had all of these other outside interests that are being neglected because you're trying to become, achieve this amazing, incredible goal that you wanted to achieve for a long time. And so sometimes it's reconnecting with the things outside of that one little piece of your identity that you've been focusing on. So if
Mm.
you're an artist, start painting again or playing music or take your dog for a walk. I mean, reconnect with who you are. You're not just what you do.
That is so incredible. Also, again, where were you? Where were you like 17 years ago? Um, uh, and here's a backstory, guys. I want to share this because I think it's important to hear this. I moved and specifically went to Bastyr in Seattle because I like water. I moved there because I wanted to sail. I never sailed. I literally just started sailing August of this year, 17 years later.
Oh,
And
that's
and
incredible. Yeah.
that same concept, I wanted to do this. I wanted, never did it, put it up. So what this leads me into is the leaning into your character strengths, leaning into your core values. I've just learned about the Clifton strengths. I don't know if you dive into those with anybody in terms of strengths-based coaching or the VIA, the values training. I just did that. And I was like, why did I not do this? Like, I don't know, in high school. So tell us about leaning into strengths, values, the why, tell us more about that because it's definitely been, let's say, very helpful for me to go back to sailing and be like, I did want to do this and I'm having a great time.
Yeah. I love that story and I'm so glad you shared it because I think it resonates with people. Yeah, I I think it really goes back to, again, I'll just kind of focus on developing a skill in medicine.
Yeah.
So a surgeon, develops this amazing technical skill to perform a surgery. And they spend so much time learning how to do the surgery that they think their skill of performing the surgery is an innate part of their being, right? But really, what's important is what were the pieces of themselves that allowed them to learn that skill? So, was it curiosity? Was it persistence? Was it hard work? Was it the like pursuit of excellence? So there are all these innate strengths that you brought up, whether it's the VIA or the Clifton strengths that we rely upon to be the people that we are. And when we start neglecting those and focusing on the things that we do rather than who we are, it just puts us at risk for being pretty miserable sometimes.
It seems so simple, right? It seems so
Hmm.
simple, but we get caught up. We get caught up. Do you think as humans it's all about, one wanting to keep the job, wanting to, learn more, wanting that drive in us to just keep pushing more? What is it about us that we forget who we are? What happens?
That's a great question, and if I knew the answer, I would share it with you. I mean, but we are definitely wired to focus on performance, I think. Or thinking about the destination rather than the journey. And it really takes a surprising amount of effort to change that mindset. Mhm.
It's true. We are that, and I think, of course, if we go to vagus nerve, right, and we go to fight or flight, and we're all trying to protect ourselves from harm, and a lot of
Yeah,
the times the harm is imaginary, as you've
yeah,
probably seen. Um,
yes,
in your case, when with performance and working on, being I mean, cardiac pediatrician, this is a big deal, right? We've got little hearts, little bodies, lots to learn. When you were working on performance drive, things of that nature, what are some of the things, I saw on your Instagram, the lies I've told myself, and I laugh because I'm like, oh God, there's so many. But the things you tell yourself,
right.
just one, I really need this extra certificate. I really need to do this training. Give us a little background on the things that drove you in performance to just keep going to the point where finally you had to had to be like, I'm not okay. Not okay.
Yeah, yeah. I don't, I'm not exactly sure what it is about me, but I definitely have always been someone who's just driven to do the best or be the best. And there was probably a lot of external messaging that kind of, shaped that part of my being. But I think two things have helped me along the way. So one is the ability to say, you know what, I don't know.
Hmm.
Or I'm at the limit of what I know, or we're at the limit of what we know in the field, and being able to say that to myself, being able to say that to patients, being able to say that to my colleagues is just having the power to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out, or let's use the information that we have to make the best decision possible. And that's pretty freeing, actually, to be able to just admit that, you know what, I don't know something, and I actually don't have to know something, but I just have to create a path forward, but I may not have to have the exact right answer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the I don't knows do drive us. I think the strengths, when I did the Clifton strengths analysis, I kind of looked at it and was like, okay, I can see where part of this could go negative
Yeah,
instead of positive. Where like my top five strengths, one of them was learner, another one was achiever, and I'm like, well, we can see where this could go from,
right,
0 to
right, yeah.
60. Did you do your Clifton strengths? Do you know yours in terms? Hey, Health Junkies, time for a little break here. Wanted to tell you about Ben's programs. Dr. Ben has programs for pre-med students, med students, and for physicians. Now, here's the thing. I asked him about it. I was like, well, what if someone is a nurse? What if someone is in the medical field? He said, definitely these programs could apply. So I wanted to share with you, just in the event that maybe this resonates with you, you can be a naturopathic doctor, an acupuncturist, these can resonate with you. But also, if you know somebody or you know somebody in your family that really could benefit from this information, think about medical students, folks who want to be doctors. Wouldn't this be a great way for them to really be all in on themselves to be able to care for folks without causing harm to their own health? I wish I had this stuff when I was starting out school 17 plus years ago. So, nevertheless, Dr. Ben has offered 30% off of his courses with the code HealthFix30. So if you know someone or you yourself may need a little help, check out Dr. Ben's courses. It's good stuff there and something that definitely could save you in the career if you're dabbling on thinking about quitting. And if you know someone or maybe your own doctor is really struggling, doesn't hurt to give them a little hint. Just saying. All right, let's get back to the podcast. Did
Yeah,
I give
I
it?
did the VIA strength,
Yeah.
so very similar thing. And one of my top strengths was persistence, which exactly like you said, that can you can overuse a strength and that can turn into a negative thing. And For me, the what helped me in that specific scenario was one of my other strengths was just the appreciation of excellence and beauty. And so one thing that I then focused on was at my coach at the time told me, you know what? Why don't you use this strength a little bit on your walk into work and just look for one thing that you think is beautiful on the walk into work. And it sounds so cheesy, but it worked. It changed my mindset walking into work, and I was focused on, this amazing thing that I saw, and not like walking into the corn maze like we talked about earlier.
I think that's I also had the excellence in beauty and I like that one. I kind of was confused as like, how do I use this one? But that makes sense, finding beauty. And I think a lot of people will say, oh, well, I live somewhere boring. I'm like, come on, there's beauty everywhere. You just gotta look. Just gotta look for it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in Iowa, right? We don't have a coast or mountains, so
And a lot of people would think the Midwest is super like just boring as all get out, right? But corn, the rose. I'm looking outside because I'm currently in Wisconsin right now because I spend half
ah,
my time in Wisconsin. And I'm looking outside. They just cut the corn. I'm missing it. I like how the rose look. I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
pretty. I
yeah.
like how it sways. So, I guess prop for the Midwest guys. It's not, there's beauty everywhere. There's beauty
Yes,
everywhere.
yes.
Now, one of the things back to the lies I've told myself, you had an Instagram post and guys, I'm gonna kind of try to quote it as best as I can, but it was like, I'm not a good doctor because I called in sick. Now, this is something a lot of people are afraid to take sick time. They're afraid they're going to be judged for it. There's so many things. And there's also the people need me. And one of the biggest things that happened in my mind over the whole course of my career is I cannot call in sick. And I felt guilty telling people I was taking vacation. I literally
Hmm.
felt like I was letting them down. Did you have this experience?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that I have like 500 hours of banked vacation time, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
use it as much as I should. And Yeah, it's hard. It's a struggle to prioritize yourself. And I think in healthcare, whether you're self-employed or whether you're employed by, a hospital system or a university, uh, there's also a little bit of pushback when you take vacation or take time away because you come back and none of that work is usually covered. And so you come back and you almost pay for being gone. And so learning how to deal with that, is a skill that honestly I'm still working on. Mhm.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I really am because I'm the same. There isn't a great system in the
Mhm.
medical field for if you do leave, it's got your emails are going to build up. And I think for a lot of people that's true in any career really, the emails are going to
Yeah.
build up. No matter if you put a responder on there, they're still going to show up. And then there's the different, labs are going to come in, people's
Mhm.
imaging reports are going to come in. It's all going to be there. And at the end of vacation, has this ever happened to you where you start to get anxious?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The last 2 days of vacation aren't great sometimes, right? Because you just know what you're going to walk back into. And so my solution for that is I just take longer vacation. So I have 7 really great days rather than 5 great days and 2 bad days. You know what I mean? But
That's a great, I mean, that's thinking of it that way is amazing because I think I actually started doing this, making sure that I had like a day or two before I went back
yeah.
because I could adjust. But I think a lot of people don't think about that because they'll like literally fly in that night and back to work the next day. And maybe we need to be thinking about the buffer zone between.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. A buffer zone is so important so that you can have your time away and truly be away and not worry about what's going to happen when you come back. A ramp up and a ramp down kind of thing.
I like that because I mean, honestly, and maybe this has happened to you too with vacations. I mean, I've been in 2 to 3 days before I can actually relax. I feel
Yeah.
I'm still thinking like, did I check off on that lab? Did I send that patient that message? Did this happen? Is that kind of how your brain works too?
Absolutely. It's so hard to let go of the to-do list. And so it takes a while to wind down.
Oh, I think a lot of people can resonate with this. You guys don't have to be doctors to have these kind of things and have the scaries. I mean, the scaries, even for a lot of people, happen on Sundays if they have the weekend off. Now,
Yes.
for a lot of medical providers, some folks, especially if you are in the hospital system, you're working on the weekend. Now, in your particular practice, do you work on the weekends or are you off on weekends?
It depends on the week. So I'll have weeks where I'm just Monday through Friday and other weeks where I'm on 7 days in a row. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And this is something that I wanted to bring up because there's a lot of nurses that listen to my
Yeah.
podcast and they'll be working schedules like that as well. And they'll find that day before the 7 day stretch that there
Hmm.
starts to be a little more anxiousness, a little bit more thought process coming into it and going, I've got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that. What kind of things have helped you in that? I'm going to call it Sunday scaries, but it could be the pre-work day scaries whenever it shows up. What kind of things have you employed to help folks out?
Yeah. We I think developed just some traditions as a family that try to just make Sunday special. So we're
Nice.
focused on sort of those traditions rather than what's coming on Monday. And so like one thing we do is we just have Sunday supper and whoever's around, we have some extended family in the area. And so whoever's around comes over and we just hang out and have dinner, break bread, so to speak. And I think that's really worked for me because then that becomes the focus of Sunday and not what's going to happen on Monday. I think
Oh,
when I go to bed, I still probably think about work, but my mindset's so different just because we have that ritual on Sunday. Yeah.
that's huge. I mean, that used to be a tradition for years and years. A lot of people would do the Sunday suppers, and I think we should bring it back. I like that. I
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. I might have to figure that out over here and do some things like that. Now, another, aspect of lies we tell ourselves is that we can't take breaks during the
Mm.
day. And a
Hmm.
lot of folks, I always will tell folks like, hey, by law, you get a 15-minute break
Right.
every 4 hours and you do get a lunch break. Like that is by law. However, it seems in the medical field, if you walk around and look, you're going to see people on their computer eating as fast as they
Yep.
possibly can, shoving food in between patients. Like I see it all the time. Um, what are some of your things there in terms of creating boundaries? And we'll talk about boundaries in a little bit here around
Yeah.
breaks and working on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of eating lunch away from your desk. I struggle to do that sometimes, but even if it's just 15 minutes, especially this time of year when it's, beautiful outside for most people, like getting outside and getting some sunshine and just eating your lunch outside is a great thing to do. It's also a great way to build camaraderie. So I'm fortunate that I have several colleagues that I work with, so I'm able to grab someone and be like, hey, let's just go grab a cup of coffee and take a few minutes and just connect over the football game coming up or whatever it is that we're excited about.
That's right. You are a Hawkeyes fan, is what I
I'm a
saw.
Hawkeye fan. That's right. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. I mean, you guys could talk about the Ohio State. You could talk about,
Right,
Michigan. You got
right.
a lot of folks in that department you guys could be talking about. Good deal.
Yes.
And some rivalries, maybe if you've got some folks from other states. So, fall's a good time of year, I think, to take breaks and talk about, yeah, football, talk about, whatever else interests pumpkins. I don't know.
Pumpkins. Yeah. Yeah.
Pumpkin
Trick or
patches.
treating. Yeah. Kids are picking out their Halloween costumes, right? So,
Right, right. We got lots of things to talk about. So and I think a lot of people are genuinely curious about who's doing what. And so one of the things I like to bring up is like talk with people versus scroll on Instagram or Facebook to see what they're doing.
yeah.
'Cause-
Put your phone down on those 15-minute breaks. Yeah.
right, right. So, really we've talked about a lot of like the main things that happen with folks, but one of the bigger things, back to is it hormones or is it burnout? I think for a lot of people, we think about burnout as being like the end point where we're about to blow up our life and we are
Mm.
literally at our wits end, whether it's fatigue, whether it's anxiety, whether there's some sort of mental health kind of disturbance going on, whatever it may be. What are some of the other subtle signs just to give folks a little clue of what are some of the other subtle signs where maybe we're not ready to blow our life up, but we're starting to head towards burnout? What may be some things that we could look for, we could identify, and kind of pull it away a little bit from being hormones versus burnout?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, just putting it into buckets, there's like the physical, emotional, and sort of spiritual bucket. So, um, physically, I mentioned like one of my difficulties was sleeping. So I think change in sleep habits is the big one. Change in appetite. And what I've encountered, which is interesting, is people have the interest to do things still, unlike, some other conditions like depression where the interest is gone. People have the interest to do something, but they don't have the energy to. So you go home and you think, oh, I really actually really want to go to a run, but I just can't. I'm exhausted. Um, I think emotionally, it's probably varies from person to person, but I would say if you're a little bit shorter than you used to be and you notice that people maybe are avoiding asking you questions, is one. And maybe just a little bit of feeling anxious or feeling down. So kind of just a change in your mood. And spiritually, I would say it's just that sense of I just kind of don't care, and whatever your belief system is or whatever it is that's important to you, you just kind of notice that I just don't care that much right now.
I think the I don't care is really important to touch on
Hmm.
because it showed up in my world where I love cooking. I was a super foodie. I at one point had a website called Recipe Whisperer back way in the early days of the internet and things. And oddly enough, I stopped cooking. I just was like, I don't care what I eat anymore. In fact, the appetite changed. I didn't even care to eat. I would
Hmm.
not eat all day, partially because I was like, well, I don't have time to eat during the day. I'm too busy. So I'm just
Yeah.
not going to. And then it would turn into get home and like Mama Bear like tears apart the house, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, these are just little things, guys. I want to put out there things that I've experienced, and Ben's laughing because I'm sure he's seen that with folks
yeah.
or maybe himself. Um, in that case. But it's a really big one, I think, for a lot of folks to notice in terms of the I don't care. Like, I don't care what we eat. I don't
Hmm.
care where we go for dinner. I don't really like decision fatigue, maybe is another
That's exactly a
manifestation.
great way to phrase it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. So guys, it's something to kind of differentiate because I feel like hormones have a little bit more of a spice to it. Whereas this is more like situational, like you can tie it in, but you can also see the fatigue of like decision fatigue, life fatigue, physical
Yeah.
fatigue is where kind of I would see things. I'd get home, yeah, after I like pillaged the kitchen, I would crash and
Hmm.
then wondered why I gained a bunch of weight. Um,
Right, right. Yeah.
this this is yeah, this is what's happening. Now, one of the things I mentioned before we hit record was looking at how doctors are somewhat treated. And guys, I am gonna go on a little bit. I'm not gonna call it a rant. I'm gonna say it's a public service announcement for how you treat your doctors. One of the big things I had mentioned to Ben was that sometimes, folks will call me multiple times because their prescription didn't go through. And, you know, I explain that s- I did my job. I swear. I mean, I have gone to the point, Ben, I won't lie that sometimes I've gone to the point where I screenshot my EHR system showing
Hmm.
people that has been put in because it's one of those things that in the system, sometimes things work a little slower right now, whether it's referrals, what it not. And it it's one of those things where yes, I may be more sensitive because I'm still coming out of burnout phase and
Hmm.
you can speak to that because sometimes we can blow other things off. But it's also here is where we're at boundaries. And I
Hmm.
think for a lot of people with burnout, we've lost some of our boundaries. We've stepped over some of our boundaries. And this is where another thing that I think is really important to talk about because having someone have so much access to you. Yes, my particular practice is that way because I'm solo, but at the same
Hmm.
time, setting boundaries because I
Yep.
probably wouldn't be annoyed by this if I had better boundaries around these things. So share the boundaries situation and going down that route.
Yeah. Um, so I guess I'll have a couple thoughts. So the
Yeah.
first one that is just sort of a recommendation for people, and healthcare is hard for patients. I mean, our healthcare system, no matter what your role is a little bit dysfunctional.
Mhm.
And that's very true on the patient side. It's also true on the provider side. And physicians, nurses, therapists are really employees in the system. Even if you're self-employed, you're still really just a cog in a big system, and the amount of control that you have over what happens is really small. But because we're in a position of decision making, it seems like we have control over everything, but really we don't. And so, one thing that I love, a good tactic for patients if they are frustrated and they just need something accomplished, is to start with a question and say, "Hey, where's my prescription at?" Or, "Hey, how can I get this appointment scheduled?" Rather than, "I need my prescription right now," or "I need this appointment right now." So I think starting with a question is just really helpful because it sets an amicable tone for everyone. So that would be my advice for when you need something from a provider. Just start with a question. It's really helpful. Um, on the provider side, boundaries are hard, right? I mean, it's really hard because we went into this field to help people, and you just want to help them all the time. And
Mhm.
so, um, I think setting expectations. So one is, when if people can email you, having an automatic reply that says, "I will respond to your message within 24 or 48 hours," and if this is urgent, contact the appropriate
Yeah.
urgent clinic, right? And so setting an expectation that, hey, this isn't going to be an immediate response, I think is really helpful. Um, Number two is when you're in a position to be able to turn things off, whether it's remove the EMR from your phone or even carry just a personal phone and a professional phone or something, physically setting boundaries so that that tendency that we all have to just do 5 more minutes of work is you have a block there where you can't just do 5 more minutes of work.
Ah, so huge, so huge. Because I hear that from folks in all industries, with the blocking off the time and being like, "This is when I'm done. This is the do not disturb." I like the do not disturb thing on the iPhone. It has helped me,
Mhm.
immensely to not have that, like, yeah, 5 more minutes. Oh, let me just deal with this. Oh, let me like, and you question yourself because you're like, could I deal with it tomorrow?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
9 times out of 10, yes. Yes, and of course, in the medical field, we do have to have that, you know, emergency line, and we used to call it the bat phone when I used to carry around 2 phones before there was the
Yes.
phone forwarding thing. So amazing, phone forwarding, but
Mhm.
nevertheless, it is important to think of those distinctions, and I like that. I like that for folks. Now, back to one of the other things that you had on Instagram that I absolutely loved was the guilt-free choices to
Mm.
prioritize your well-being. Because being an empathetic person, I think a lot of people are. A lot of people have empathy for others. What they don't even have to be in the medical field. I think there's
Mhm.
a lot of this like, how do I prioritize myself? What are some of the guilt-free choices that you've used and recommended to your folks to choose in looking at self-care and things of that nature?
Yeah. I think empathy is a great word for that. And so frequently, what I will do for myself and what I recommend to others is, would you give that advice to a friend? So, if you're feeling guilty about taking a vacation and a friend came up to you and asked, "Hey, I'm thinking I'm going to go on this vacation. I'm so excited about it." What would you tell them, and what are you telling yourself? Right. And so if your self-talk is very different than what you would tell someone else, then, reassessing that self-talk is really important.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, self-talk, woo, it's impressive what we'll tell others to do, but we can't seem to take that advice for ourselves, and especially I don't know how it is for men, but for women, it is we can't seem to take our own advice. It is
Yeah.
something.
I probably there are different struggles, but I think that is universal, probably, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's talk about your website a little bit and your programs and how you're helping folks. So the developing doctor, I'm going to pull up the website so I have it here on the front so you guys will see me kind of looking off to the side. But you've got courses for pre-med, medical students, trainees, physician. I mean, it's you've covered all your bases in the medical field. Give us a little scoop about what you were thinking in creating all of them and did you do surveys or were you working off of your own personal experience?
Yeah, it was largely based off of my own personal experience. So my experience going through the medical system, and then I've always worked in academic medicine, and so in that role, I've helped with promotions advisory, kind of onboarding students, mentoring, coaching students, and so from those interactions, I just recognize that there's a whole skill set that we are lacking when we leave medical training that's really necessary to function in the healthcare system in a way that's healthy, and
Mhm.
so uh, finding a way to kind of develop those skills is what the goal of my coaching, what my courses are. So things like communication, emotional intelligence, leadership, self-care, recognizing your values. So a lot of the things that we've talked about are things that we really focus on.
It's interesting to hear you say emotional intelligence. It's one of those things that I haven't really heard about and learned about until the last couple years. And I know it wasn't in my training. And people will think Bastyr, we would have done all these different things. And then the truth is I think that Bastyr was trying so hard to keep us very close to the medical school training. A lot of people
Mhm.
don't think that, but the truth is I think they were trying so hard they overcompensated in the medical school training and didn't give us as much of the heart center training that I would have probably benefited from, and especially this emotional intelligence, because didn't have anyone coming in telling me to process my emotions, how to think about our emotions. Explain how you're working with folks and teaching emotional intelligence to the medical field or providers and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the thing that surprises me is that we have difficulties identifying our own emotions, and that's
Mhm,
really the base of emotional intelligence. So
mhm.
sometimes it's something just as simple as naming what you're feeling. Trying to do that without judgment is hard. But sort of naming what you're feeling, and that's just a great place to start. And if you notice that the emotions that you're feeling are limited to two or three, then that's probably a place to work, right? Because we all have more emotions than angry, happy, sad. And so if you're feeling angry, are you really angry or are you anxious? Or, what is it that you're really feeling that's making you feel tense, that makes you think you're angry? And so working on that skill is really the first step that I encourage people to focus on.
I like that. Yeah, I think for many of us, I'm like, where's this training in grade school? Where's
Right,
this
right.
training in like preschool? Like all of these things I've learned in the last, I will say since I will admit that since I went through my own burnout just around COVID, I mean, I think it was all of these things to my mind. I'm like, why are we not teaching this to preschoolers so that they can process emotions better and not end up with some of the things us adults or little quirks we have?
Yeah, yeah. And I think so much of our training in healthcare and I think other fields is focused on the client, so the patient. And so we learn how to communicate with the patient and we learn how to deal with their emotions, but we don't really learn how to communicate with our colleagues or with our coworkers, and we don't learn how to communicate with ourselves. And so that's really what I think is at the core of emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, self-communication first and foremost. And I think also just losing a little bit of, and this is kind of maybe something that maybe you talk about in your courses, is this this facade that we are okay, everything's okay, and we're strong if we don't have these symptoms, and trying to be strong with your coworkers, like, I'm fine, everything's fine, I'm tough,
Mhm.
I got this. I found that when I worked in a clinic, medical setting, where I was the naturopath and there was medical doctors I was working with, and other different providers, and I felt like on days where you were just like, I have to suck it up, buttercup. you know like, don't let them see you cry.
Right,
Don't do
right,
it.
right.
Not good. You know, but it does feel like that is still to some point in the field where we do feel like we've got to have like that protective barrier. What are you recommending with folks to work on that and really work on communication with fellow coworkers when you're just like, I gotta tell somebody I'm not doing all right.
Yeah. Um, it's hard, right? Learning those skills is hard. But I think again, starting with a question, and if it was, let's say, just say it was a difficult interaction, um, rather than assuming that you know what the other person was feeling and what they were thinking during the interaction, just start with a question and say, "Hey, I felt really uncomfortable about our last conversation. How did you feel?" And so opening up the door to just talk about feelings as well as the facts of the situation, but just opening up the door with a question and asking how other people feel is a great place to start.
Sounds like questions are the way to go here. Ask your doc a question versus demand, and ask a question with coworkers. It's so important. I think it takes down the level
It
of
does. Yeah.
like, yeah, intensity, let's put it that way, versus a statement. The question definitely brings in the empathy too. I like that.
Mhm.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Man, Dr. Ben, I wish you were around 17 years ago with us, to get me on the right foot in my practice. But nevertheless, you're here for all of us now. And I mean, I looked through the website extensively and was just loving it. I'm like, oh, this is great. I feel like this should be a foundational program for anyone that's in the medical field. Now, of course, I'm going to ask you the question. I know it's geared towards physicians. Do you take nurses? Do you take, you know, massage therapists, acupuncturists, naturopaths?
Absolutely. I mean, really, I speak about physicians because that's my lived experience, and so
Sure.
it's hard for me to talk about others, experiences in a way that feels genuine. But the pain points are really similar for everyone in healthcare, and honestly, probably for anyone in the service industry where we're helping others. And so, I'm happy to talk to anybody that's experiencing burnout and see if I can help. And if I'm not the right person, I know plenty of people that I can point them to that would be able to help them out. So.
That's awesome. All right. So let's tell folks where they can find you online. Of course, it's thedevelopingdoctor.com, but what about Instagram, LinkedIn, those guys? What are your handles there so folks can find you?
Yeah, so it's all of them are the developing doctor, or you can just look me up, Ben Ranking. I've got personal and professional pages, and the content is very similar in all of them. Um, yeah, and I'd love to connect with people.
Awesome. I love it. And you're still practicing.
Correct. Yeah, I'm a full-time physician, so I work full-time in pediatric cardiology, and then I have this coaching business, which just kind of grew out of my personal
Mhm.
experience and is now something that is really fun for me to do. So.
That's awesome. I mean, there's not, I mean, your specialty is unique with pediatric cardiology. And if folks are in Iowa, are we Ames, Iowa? I
Iowa
don't,
City, Iowa
Iowa
City.
City.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cause I'm like, I don't remember where the Hawkeyes are.
Yeah.
Um,
University of Iowa.
there we go. There you go, guys. I'm embarrassed that I couldn't get that one out. I should know better. I grew up in the Midwest. So, nevertheless, if you're looking for a pediatric cardiologist as well, we've got a great one here. But nevertheless, man, Dr. Ben, thank you for what you're doing. This is awesome. I'm definitely going to be sharing this with all my doctor pals because let's face it, burnout's real. It's definitely impacting a lot of folks, and we got to do something about it. Got to spread the word. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I learned a lot from your story as well. So I appreciate you sharing it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.